of our panelists earlier in the day quite pithily put it. She said that, Devina Mehra, she said that Trump has taken a wrecking ball to all kinds of multilateral institutions, WTO, WHO, NATO. So the world order as we know it since the Second World War, that seems to be changing. So I want to start by asking Ambassador Bhatia, what do you think will be the nature of this new global order which the Trump administration is trying to forge? Do you think it will be limited to global capital and mercantile alliances, or will it be more? Will it be sustainable, or should we all just hunker down for 4 years and wait for it to unravel?
So many questions in the first question, so I hope you'll give me 2-3 minutes to really answer it properly. Wrecking ball, Mr. Trump, all that is fine. Disruption, yes, there is no doubt on that. But I think, I come from the national capital to the business capital of India, so I should share the basic thinking that prevails at the national level. And it is that let us understand and interpret a new leader rather than demonize him for our own selfish reasons, pragmatic reasons, because we have to deal with the leader of that strategic partner of India. So disruption is happening. The global order as we knew for the past 70 years is changing radically, very rapidly. But the second question which was there in your query, frankly, nobody knows what will be the shape of the new order. We all can speculate, we can analyze, we can also reach some tentative conclusions, but we don't yet know whether that new order will work out or not. And yet the fact is that on a day-to-day basis, our leadership has to manage the international affairs and within that our economy. And I think the message I bring to you from Delhi is that there is confidence, there is maturity, that we understand what is happening in the world, and we would try to deploy these changes and shifts in such a manner that India's interests, India's political interests, India's economic interests are not affected. So in short, I think people here who already are quite happy generally with the way in which our economy is being managed can be assured that when it comes to international affairs, geopolitics, diplomacy, we are moving in a fairly positive direction. And Mr. Trump, in fact, if you would have seen Twitter today or X, he has just made a statement. He has once again praised Prime Minister Modi. He has just said that Mr. Modi and Donald Trump are good friends. And talking about the tariffs, on which, of course, my colleague would talk, Mr. Trump has just said that it will all work out.
Dr. Wadhawan, will it all work out? This current protectionist stance which the US is taking, how is it going to play out for A, India, and B, also for countries which are export-oriented?
Yeah, so it's a very turbulent period, and, in a sense, it's a continuum of sorts from President Trump's first term. And fortunately, in his first term, the lessons were learned fairly quickly, and he realized that the path he was professing, putting tariffs and then inviting retaliatory tariffs from others was not a sustainable path, and it was not in the interest of any country to have that sort of an arrangement. So sense prevailed, and on the tariff front, foreign trade front, some calm was restored towards the end of his first term. And I see the same thing happening even today. And I think some lessons he has already learned. He put those duties on Canada, Mexico, then put them on hold. He put some duties on China, put them on hold. Now from April 2nd, he's threatening to put duties on a much larger scale across countries. So what it's going to do is disrupt the American industry. All these countries, their major trading partners, are major suppliers of inputs, major suppliers of critical intermediate goods, raw materials. So putting those duties will immediately impact US industry. I was seeing today, consumer confidence is down 20% in the US, and inflation, core inflation, is up by 20%. So inflation itself is not 20%, but whatever that level was, 2-3%, that is 20% higher today thanks to President Trump's action. So I think he will learn these lessons sooner rather than later. And as Ambassador Bhatia just mentioned, that Twitter message is encouraging. He realizes that he needs to sit down on the negotiating table. And I think with India, he's worked out a time path for reaching a kind of bilateral trade agreement. And he realizes that that bilateral trade negotiation in good faith cannot have reciprocal duties simultaneously applied. You can't expect India to accept that situation that you are experiencing duties imposed by the US on India, and at the same time we do nothing about them and negotiate a trade agreement. And if he insists on putting these duties on April 2nd, then India and other countries have no option but to retaliate. That's an accepted action, in trade circles, trade parlance. If someone puts unjustified duties beyond their bound rates, these are all WTO violative, by the way, but of course no one is caring for the WTO right now, then the natural response of any other country would be to put those retaliatory tariffs, and India will have no option but to put them. And then the trade negotiation can go on the side. So I am presuming that, better sense is going to prevail sooner rather than later, and this sort of madness will not be, sustainable for too long.
You want to add to that? No. Okay, but taking off from what he said, he appears very optimistic. Okay, but to give you one example, see, I'm not even talking about things like NATO where the agreement was implicit. Take the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, for example. Okay, it was a proper treaty which was signed between the three countries. Now his actions, what the US is doing, it's not honoring that agreement, isn't it? How does one deal with such a situation?
No, I think it's important to appreciate that tariffs in certain cases are being used for larger political purposes. They are not only for commercial reasons. So especially when it comes to Mexico, Canada, China, and Europe, the larger political purpose is that the present administration feels that in one way or the other, either these countries are harming the American interests from the economic point of view, or from the migration point of view, or from the drugs point of view. And so the leadership has no hesitation in using a purely commercial instrument to secure the political objectives. In the case of India, if Mr. Wadhawan would agree, the approach is different. Here, the idea is that just forget about the WTO philosophy. There is no more this belief that developing countries of necessity must get some protection and developed countries must be always more generous. Mr. Trump says this is outdated philosophy. We are going to charge you the same tariff that you are charging us. And I entirely agree with the former Commerce Secretary. I think the message from Delhi to Washington has gone very clearly. We are ready for a mutually beneficial, mutually negotiated agreement. We are ready to take this trade level to 500 mission, that is to $500 billion. But it has to be done in a proper way. And I think the team which has just finished probably has gone with much greater clarity, which must have been responsible for this rather positive sounding message by the president. So we should stay hopeful. But may I just add one more point, although tariffs is really not my domain. Two good things are happening. Tariffs are being seen by a large section of people in India as our one pressing opportunity to reform our economy. Just as we faced several important moments in the past, This is a moment for us to bring competitiveness to our products by lowering down duties somewhat to the same level as ASEAN countries. And now you notice that in this country, the pro-FTA environment was never as strong as it is today. The government is formally committed to produce 2 FTAs with EU and UK by the end of the year, and the bilateral trade agreement with the US by the fall. Other things are already happening. We already have some the FTAs signed. And on top of that, right now we are engaged also in negotiations for several bilateral investment agreements. So atmosphere is changing, and I think we must recognize that even before Mr. Trump came, all this has begun to happen. Now there is urgency. In fact, Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, just 3 days back, said this in Delhi, that there is an urgency, and the government is totally conscious and willing to respect it.
So, Dr. Wadhawan, should we start writing obituaries for the WTO?
So you see, certainly the WTO is completely disrupted and essentially dysfunctional. Even, when the appellate body was functional, when Mr. Trump first came in, the appellate body was functional, and then at some point it became dysfunctional because the retiring members of the appellate body were not replaced. Even then, Mr. Trump went ahead and put those aluminum steel duties beyond his bound rates, on security ground. There is a security provision in the WTO rules that when you are in a situation like a state of war with another country, then you can violate your WTO commitments. But then he put those duties on his closest allies, EU, Canada, Mexico, India. So clearly he was violating the security provision, but then the WTO dispute resolution system and the courts have treated that provision with great flexibility. What is a state of war between countries is left to that particular state to decide. So even before the appellate body became non-functional, President Trump was quite willing to violate the law and exceed his bound rates. And then, of course, now there is no appellate body, so whatever disputes are decided by the panel, they are appealed into a void. The appellate stage is a void, and so it is pending in perpetuity. And so clearly the WTO, in terms of being able to enforce rules, is dysfunctional, but it remains important. It remains important even for the US. The US does not want the world in general to do to it what it is doing to the world. They want everyone else to follow the rules. In 90% of the trading scenario, they want the rules to be followed. They don't want others to indulge in the same madness. So the rules are still there for the weak to follow. If you're economically not very powerful, you violate the rule, your trading partners will retaliate against you. So for the weak, the rule is there to follow, and the very countries which are disrupting the WTO, they want the rule to be followed in general. So the WTO will remain important in that sense for others to follow. And the whole thing, I would like to say, President Trump's rhetoric is very misleading. It is founded on plain falsehood. He is looking at the goods trade deficit as the only measure of American success. So he looks at the goods trade deficit and says that the entire world is cheating us. But you need to look at the economic success of a country much beyond goods. The US economy has graduated beyond goods. They are a services economy. They are a tech economy. They are, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Googles. They are earning billions of dollars abroad. Who is going to count that? When you're counting just the trade deficit, you need to see the incomes on services. You need to see the incomes of your tech companies. And this whole rhetoric that, you can't have differential tariffs with developing countries having higher bound rates and the developed world having lower bound rates, that whole rhetoric is also misleading because it was part of a larger WTO negotiation where the developing countries conceded on things like intellectual property rights, things like services trade. So all these, pharma company profits are coming from those IPR concessions given by developing countries. The profits of the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks and the Microsofts are all coming from those concessions developing countries have given. So those higher bound rates were earned. Now President Trump just looks unilaterally at those bound rates and says it is not fair for our trading partners to have higher tariffs than us. But then you graduated away from goods, you're a services giant, and your people are earning huge profits. For instance, the Apple phone. Technically, the Apple phone is imported into the US and is contributing to the US trade deficit. But if you look at the value in an Apple phone, only 20% is non-American value. The material part of the Apple phone is 20% of the value. 80% is the intellectual property. That is all American. So what all this has done is created huge inequality in American society. America has done wonderfully well as an economy. It has been the most successful economy in the post-World War II world. Its per capita income is over $80,000, higher than Europe. It has done better than almost all other developed countries. So US cannot complain that the world has cheated us. This new economic order, especially with the strength of the dollar, has served the US very, very well. In the aggregate, they've produced a huge, economic surplus in the US. But in terms of sharing it is where the problem is. There is a huge American underclass, which is the source of the problem. And when the last, Trump's first election happened, there were two options before the American people, and Trump's option was, I'll bring back the jobs of yesterday, and he's still promising the jobs of yesterday. His tariffs are supposed to bring back those steel jobs and those auto jobs and those textiles jobs, and those are the days of the 60s when auto workers would get $60 an hour, lifelong pension, lifelong medical benefits, but those jobs are no longer there. Today, an auto plant is run by, say, 100 people. It's all robotics. The assembly lines are all robotics. A power plant is run by 5 people. So those jobs cannot come back. The other alternative was what Bernie Sanders offered, that I will prepare you for the jobs of tomorrow through access to education, access to public health. And he, of course, in the typical American fashion, was dismissed as a socialist. And America now, for a second time, has been deceived into believing that, those jobs of yesterday are going to come back. They are not going to come back. Ultimately, America will realize our problem is not exploitation by the world. Our problem is not that we have not done well as an economy because of our trading partners being unfair to us. They will realize that what is wrong with America is lack of equity, and ultimately they'll have to face this question. And, better sense should prevail then.
Should prevail. But in the meantime, do you think the effect of this, Ambassador Bhatia, will it push India and China closer together? At the dialogue you were referring to, which Foreign Minister Jaishankar had, he did make a statement about, a thaw in relations between India and China. Because China doesn't seem to consider India as an equal. And right now, there is a silence on our borders, but is it temporary? And probably China is silent because it has bigger issues to resolve, like its economy, domestic consumption issues, etc. What is your reading?
Let me make some comments relating to what has been said by Mr. Wadhawan, and I'll also very much answer your question, and I'll try to be as concise as possible. I think from the viewpoint of international affairs and geopolitics, both the government and a large section of the strategic community is looking at the Trump administration not in a negative manner. I think Mr. Jaishankar himself has gone on record saying that there are many things about the Trump administration which are working for India, which are positive. The Prime Minister himself has said that there are certain common things, there are certain bonds between him and the American president. What exactly are we referring to? We are referring to the fact that Mr. Trump's rift with Europe has created greater space for multipolarity. And this is something which is very useful for India, Secondly, he has opened a new channel of communication and friendship and cooperation with Russia. This is a positive for India because India has been committed to Russia, and if our two strategic partners are going to talk to each other, it is good for New Delhi. And on top of that, I think there is this underlying idea of America to probably try to wean Russia away from China, do the reverse of what Nixon and Kissinger did back in 70s, which is again a positive thing for India. So in that light, your question about China and the Trump factor in it, I think let us be very clear and frank. There is an America factor in India-China relations, and there is a China factor in India-America relations. So as of now, India-China reset has started. It has not been completed yet. Serious efforts are being made to take the negotiations forward. And the hope is that things will move in a positive direction. And yet, nobody is being unrealistic enough to say that India, China are going back to the Hindi, China, Chini bhai days at all. 2025, or this decade, which I call turbulent 20s, there have been so many crises starting from 2020, COVID, Galvan, Ukraine, Gaza, and now this new situation. So we cannot be sure as to in what fashion the decade will end. But all that I'm saying is that yes, there is, obviously criticism in the world of the present American leader. But I think we can overall, at least from the diplomatic and IR point of view, take a somewhat more relaxed view.
Right. We'll open the floor for questions. Yes, please, the gentleman.
I think, my name is Harshit. I think you answered one of the questions, but I just wanted to understand India's role in, WTO negotiations with countries like Brazil, and how are they going to help us in terms of trade policies?
It is not clear. Can you give him a better mic, please?
Is it better now?
Yeah.
The question is mainly on the India's role in WTO's negotiation and how it is going to help us, typically in emerging countries like China and Brazil.
Dr. Wadhawan, would you like to take that? I think he's asking about WTO negotiations, right?
Yeah, roles of India in WTO negotiations.
Role of India in WTO negotiations.
In WTO negotiation? Yeah, so you see, WTO was a major departure from all previous institutions which comprise the global economic order. WTO was conceived as a fully inclusive, member-driven organization with all decisions by consensus. So WTO basically, every member has a veto power. Any rules which have to be adopted, if even one country dissents, that rule is not adopted. So, and in spite of this very demanding sort of condition for rules to be adopted, WTO did quite well by adopting a lot of rules, including the trade facilitation agreement, which was the last WTO agreement. Of course, some of those rules have not been very fair to developing countries. Some of those rules did not have the outcomes that was envisaged. One major outcome was the bridging of the development differential between developed and developing countries. So all those things didn't happen. Then you reached a stage where the development agenda of the WTO was abandoned and those negotiations came to a halt. New issues came up, investment facilitation, e-commerce, all those issues were brought in by developed countries. And then, of course, you had all the non-trade issues coming into global trade, environment, labor, gender. All these were aimed at undermining the comparative advantage of developing countries. The West took 200 years to reach a certain labor standard. The West took 200 years to reach a certain environmental standard. But countries, at a different stage of their life cycle, like India, other developing countries, are expected now to reach that overnight. So comparative advantage which arises from different economies being at a different stage of their life cycle, that comparative advantage is being undone. So the WTO negotiation sort of mechanism is at a standstill. What happened was that these plurilaterals came up. Plurilaterals mean that you don't need the entire WTO membership to be part of it, but countries which are interested in a particular area, say investment facilitation, e-commerce, MSME facilitation, they came together, 70, 80, 90 countries in each of them. So they are now negotiating and they will come out with rules which will apply to them. It is left to be seen whether those rules will apply to those who are not part of it. To the extent those are concessions extended to that group by the members to each other, whether those concessions will apply to the others who are outside the group. So all those questions are up in the air. But right now, WTO negotiations are a non-starter. To the extent, things change, we have to wait for, 4 years down the road and later. To the extent things change and people want the WTO to be revived as an effective body governing world trade, then yes, certainly India will have a major role to play. But let's see what happens.
You want to add a point?
No, I just wanted to bring, looking at this very well-informed audience, and we have been hearing, I came at your invitation a day earlier to learn so much about the business discussions. I just wanted to mainly say that that in terms of opportunities which exist for India today, because there are challenges, there are customs, but opportunities are important. And so in that context, IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, especially for people living here in Mumbai, is of great relevance. And I think I wanted to raise this because in your own town, our think tank, Gateway House, and my colleagues are here, including the executive director, they have done a lot of work on IMEC. And they have recently made a detailed presentation on IMEC and what are the opportunities for Indian business. So in that sense, maybe if Mint is interested someday, we can do something together to put across the idea that there is life beyond Mr. Trump as well, although US is supporting and backing this project. So essentially, if we could look 6 months down the line, and if we are a bit positive, it is quite possible that some of these agreements which are under negotiation may actually be successful, and many more opportunities may open towards in the Western countries. In Russia, for example, Manjit Kriplani has just returned from Russia, and she's talking about how much of potential there is for Indian labor there. And then, of course, in Southeast Asia as well. So there are opportunities. Let us not be daunted only by the challenges.
May I ask
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, one final question.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the changed scenario, what are the possibilities of SDR becoming an alternative global reserve currency? Special drawing rights.
Global reserve currencies. He's asking about global reserve currency.
There is something called SDR, special drawing rights.
Special drawing rights of the IMF.
Re-emerging as a global reserve currency since BRICS currency is out of the way.
Yeah, so SDRs are just, it's a bundle of currencies. So you see, what makes a currency strong? For instance, the dollar is generally the currency in which trade is denominated. But that is not what is making the dollar strong. What is making the dollar strong is people's willingness to buy and store dollar-denominated assets. They have faith in the dollar. Ironically, when the US causes a crisis, global financial crisis originated in New York, ironically, the money was rushing into the US as a safe haven, because the belief is that if someone is going to come out of this crisis, it is going to be the US, which will come out of it first. So the faith in the assets denominated in that currency is what keeps it strong. Let us say today you say that all trade in the world will be denominated in one of the BRICS currencies and trade will be settled in that currency. It is not still going to make that currency strong. People will trade notionally in that currency, but moment the trade is settled, when they have to decide their asset portfolio, they will hold assets of currencies they believe are strong. Like the Chinese currency, thanks to their huge trade surpluses, has acquired strength. So Chinese currency denominated assets are held in the West. So to the extent, President Trump is doing all these things, he's going to undermine faith in US denominated, dollar denominated assets. The Chinese are sitting on $4-5 trillion worth of US Treasury bills. If the Chinese get worried about the future of those US Treasury bills, they will quite logically and naturally want to get rid of them. And then you will suddenly discover that, the strength of the dollar is not that much there. So even if BRICS countries are going to trade in their own currencies, it is not going to undermine the dollar till people lose faith in dollar-denominated assets. And President Trump, by threatening BRICS and all that, is actually undermining faith in the US dollar. So by trying to achieve strength for the dollar, he's actually, undermining faith in the dollar. Similarly, for instance, India has wanted to trade in rupees, and we are trying to make rupee an international currency. That will come ultimately from India's underlying economic strength when people feel that the rupee is a stable currency and rupee-denominated assets can be, kept as a store of value, then, the rupee will also become strong. So SDRs are simply reflecting the strength of the currencies which are part of that basket. I hope I answer your question.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. So if you're worried about Trump's effect on the global economy, our panelists are hopeful. They are saying this too shall pass. Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia and Dr. Wadhawan.